At family dinner. They said I was nothing. Then Dad's boss called me ma'am. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am 29 years old. As I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home in small-town Colorado, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. 5 years since my last visit, and tomorrow I would be attending my father's company event, with my lieutenant colonel insignia hidden in my duffel bag. My family had always treated my military career as a phase I'd eventually outgrow. What they didn't know was that in less than 24 hours, everything would change when I walked into Sterling Defense Corporation as the Pentagon's liaison for their most critical contract. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the modest ranch house where I'd grown up. The same chipped paint on the shutters, the same overgrown flower beds my mother never had time to tend. Nothing had changed, including their opinion of my choices. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people closest to you, this story will show you exactly how validation can come from the most unexpected places. The moment I stepped through the front door, I was transported back to my teenage years. The same family photos lined the hallway. My brother David's football trophies, his college graduation, his wedding pictures. My own military commissioning photo was conspicuously absent. "Sarah, you made it," my mother Linda called from the kitchen without bothering to come greet me. Her voice carried that familiar tone of mild disappointment, as if my arrival was more obligation than celebration. My father, Robert Mitchell, had worked at Sterling Defense Corporation for 28 years, climbing from entry-level engineer to senior project manager through sheer determination. Our family's social status revolved entirely around his corporate success and the expectation that David would follow the same path. "David will be here for dinner," my mother informed me as I wandered into the kitchen. "He just got another promotion, lead systems engineer now, the youngest in the company's history." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, the same pride that was noticeably absent whenever my career came up in conversation. "That's wonderful," I replied, the words automatic after years of practice. "I'll congratulate him." My mother continued preparing dinner while updating me on David's accomplishments, his new house, his wife Jessica's promotion at her law firm, their plans to start a family. Not once did she ask about my life, my recent deployment, or my work. I excused myself and headed upstairs to my old bedroom, which remained frozen in time like a shrine to my pre-military life. Academic awards, high school debate team photos, and college acceptance letters still decorated the walls. Notably absent were any acknowledgments of my military achievements. No photos from my commissioning ceremony, no shadow boxes displaying my medals, no newspaper clippings about my deployments. In my parents' minds, I had derailed my potential the moment I chose ROTC over law school. I sat on my childhood bed, remembering the night I told them about accepting my commission. My father had looked at me with such bewilderment that I almost reconsidered my decision. "The military is for people without better options, Sarah," he had said. "You're valedictorian material. You could run a corporation someday." Even then, they had been positioning David to follow in my father's footsteps at Sterling Defense. My brother had eagerly embraced their plan, using every opportunity to remind me how much more practical his path was. I unpacked carefully, hanging my dress uniform in the back of the closet behind old clothes. Tomorrow, Sterling Defense would be hosting their annual board meeting, and my father had mentioned that the CEO, Patricia Hawkins, would be conducting major contract reviews. What my family didn't know was that I was now the military liaison for the $800 million cybersecurity contract between the Army and Sterling Defense. A position I had earned through 6 years of distinguished service and expertise in digital warfare systems. My fingers traced the silver oak leaf of my lieutenant colonel rank, achieved at 29, making me one of the youngest officers to reach this level in my field. I specialized in cybersecurity defense protocols, the exact technology Sterling was contracted to develop. I carefully concealed my uniform behind my old college sweaters. For tonight, I would endure one final family dinner of dismissal and condescension. Tomorrow would be different. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered, made cramped by the oversized personalities gathered around our old oak table. David had arrived with Jessica, both dressed in expensive business attire that advertised their corporate success. My cousin Amanda was also there. She worked as a financial analyst at a prestigious firm and was often held up as another example of what I should have become. "Sarah, you remember Amanda," my mother said, as if we hadn't grown up together. "She just secured funding for a $50 million infrastructure project." "Hi, Amanda," I said, giving her a genuine smile. Unlike my immediate family, Amanda had always been kind to me, even if she didn't understand my choices. "Good to see you, Sarah," she replied warmly. "It's been too long." The conversation started pleasantly as we served ourselves from the dishes my mother had prepared. My father sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his phone for work emails despite my mother's disapproving glances. "So, Dad," David began, predictably steering the conversation toward himself, "I wanted to tell you about the new project I'm leading. Patricia personally selected me to oversee the implementation phase." My father beamed with pride. "That's my boy. Patricia Hawkins doesn't hand out responsibilities lightly. You must have really impressed her." "Well," David continued, shooting me a glance to ensure I was listening, "it's the cybersecurity contract we've been developing for years. Patricia says my fresh perspective might be exactly what the project needs to reach the next level." I bit my tongue, knowing that the cybersecurity contract was actually the Army project I now oversaw. If only they knew how much authority I had over David's new assignment. My mother immediately jumped in, eager to showcase David's achievements. "Tell them about your team, honey." David puffed up visibly. 15 direct reports, including several senior engineers who've been with Sterling for over a decade. They weren't thrilled about reporting to someone younger, but they came around when they saw my results. "That's wonderful," my mother cooed, then turned to me with a thin smile. "Sarah, how are things going with your position? Still the same rank?" The dismissive way she said position instead of career wasn't lost on anyone. "Things are going well," I replied simply, not ready to reveal my recent promotion. "Still a captain or whatever?" my father asked vaguely, clearly not understanding military rank progression. "Something like that," I answered, taking a bite of mashed potatoes to avoid elaborating. "You know," my mother interjected, "Amanda just bought a beautiful townhouse downtown. 3 bedrooms with a gorgeous view of the mountains." Amanda looked uncomfortable being used as a comparison point again. "It's really not that impressive," she said graciously. "Just good timing in the market." "Still," my mother continued, "it's nice to see young people establishing themselves properly, building equity instead of moving around constantly." The dig at my military lifestyle was clear. I had lived in 6 different states in the past 7 years, something my mother considered unsettled and immature. "Speaking of tomorrow," my father said, changing the subject, "the CEO is coming for the quarterly review. It's a big deal. Patricia Hawkins doesn't visit our facility often." "I already have my presentation ready," David boasted. "Patricia personally requested my analysis of the military integration challenges." "Is there anything special planned for the visit?" I asked innocently. My father nodded. "Full department meeting, project reviews, and a special briefing about the Army contract. Some lieutenant colonel is supposed to attend as the Pentagon liaison, but I doubt they'll send anyone too senior. Probably just someone looking to pad their resume." I suppressed a smile. "That sounds interesting." "Not really," David scoffed. "Military types never understand the business complexities. They just follow protocols and check boxes." "David," Amanda said with a frown, "that's not fair." But my brother was on a roll now. "Come on, we all know the truth. The military is a backup career for people who can't compete in the private sector. They hide behind ranks and regulations instead of proving themselves in the real world." My mother nodded in agreement. "We always knew you were brilliant, Sarah. That's why it was such a disappointment when you chose that path instead of using your potential properly." "What exactly do you think I do in the Army?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Push papers, follow orders," my father shrugged. "Important work, sure, but not exactly challenging for someone with your intellect. You'll never amount to anything significant there," David laughed. 10 years from now, you'll still be taking orders while I'm running my own division at Sterling." The words stung, despite everything I'd accomplished. Years of therapy had helped me understand that their approval shouldn't define my worth, but old wounds run deep. "I think Sarah made a choice that works for her," Amanda attempted to defend me. "A waste of potential is what it is," my mother sighed dramatically. "All that intelligence. Remember how your teacher said you could run a Fortune 500 company someday?" I pushed food around my plate as they continued dissecting my supposed failures and missed opportunities. The conversation moved on to David's upcoming vacation to Europe, Jessica's promotion, and Amanda's investment portfolio. No one asked about my recent deployment or the specialized training I'd completed. As dessert was served, my father mentioned again how crucial tomorrow's meeting was for his career advancement. 28 years I've invested in Sterling. This contract could be what finally gets me promoted to senior management. I nodded sympathetically, knowing that tomorrow would change everything for all of us, though not in the way he expected. Later that night, I retreated to my childhood bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. From down the hall, I could hear my parents still discussing David's achievements. "He really is exceptional," my mother was saying. "Patricia would be foolish not to recognize his potential for executive leadership." I closed my eyes, fingers tracing the lieutenant colonel insignia I'd slipped from my bag. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Sleep eluded me as I stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to my ceiling, relics from a childhood when my dreams had been encouraged rather than dismissed. I found myself remembering a time when my parents had believed in my potential, before I chose a path they couldn't understand or value. I remembered sitting at this same dining table during my junior year of college. ROTC pamphlets spread across the surface, explaining how the program would provide leadership training and a meaningful career serving my country. "The military?" my father had asked, his face contorting as if I'd suggested joining a traveling circus. "That's for people who can't get real jobs, Sarah." "It is a real job," I had countered, "and it's what I want to do." My mother had exchanged worried glances with my father. "But what about law school? You always said you wanted to work at a prestigious firm." No, they had always said that. I had merely nodded along, trying to be the daughter they wanted me to be. When I stood my ground, the subtle undermining began. My achievements in ROTC went unacknowledged. My commissioning as a second lieutenant was attended only by Amanda, who drove 4 hours to be there when my parents suddenly had unavoidable work commitments. Yet despite their dismissal, my career had flourished beyond even my own expectations. My aptitude for cybersecurity and systems analysis had been recognized early. By 24, I had been promoted to captain and assigned to a specialized unit, developing defensive protocols against sophisticated cyber threats. By 27, I had reached major after leading a joint task force that identified and neutralized a coordinated attack on military communication networks, potentially saving countless lives and protecting classified information. Colonel Maria Rodriguez had been my first true mentor, recognizing potential in me that my family refused to acknowledge. "Mitchell," she had said after a particularly challenging simulation exercise, "you see patterns others miss. That's going to take you far in this field." Under her guidance, I learned to trust my analytical instincts and develop innovative approaches to cybersecurity challenges. When a routine security audit revealed anomalies others had overlooked, Colonel Rodriguez encouraged me to investigate further. My subsequent investigation uncovered a sophisticated attempt to breach multiple defense networks. The counter-operation I designed and led earned me an early promotion to lieutenant colonel and brought me to the Pentagon's attention. Colonel Rodriguez, by then promoted to brigadier general, had personally recommended me for the Sterling Defense Liaison position. "They're developing next-generation security protocols for military applications," she had explained. "We need someone who understands both the technical requirements and strategic implications. Someone who can bridge the gap between military needs and corporate capabilities." When she pinned the silver oak leaf to my uniform 3 months ago, the ceremony was attended by generals and Pentagon officials. But not my family. I hadn't even told them about the promotion. having learned over the years to stop seeking validation from people who refused to give it. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, General Rodriguez, had said afterward, "I hope you understand what an extraordinary achievement this is. You're the youngest officer to reach this rank in our division's history." I did understand it, but tomorrow would be the first time my family would comprehend what I had truly accomplished. The Sterling defense contract was massive. $800 million for developing advanced cybersecurity systems for military installations worldwide. As liaison, I had final approval authority on all major technical decisions, budget allocations, and implementation strategies. In the most literal sense, I would be overseeing my father's and brother's work performance. The irony was almost poetic. I got out of bed and carefully removed my dress uniform from its garment bag. The deep blue fabric was immaculate, brass buttons gleaming even in the dim light of my childhood bedroom. I ran my fingers over the rows of ribbons and medals, each representing missions, achievements, and sacrifices my family knew nothing about. The silver oak leaf insignia caught the moonlight as I examined my uniform jacket. I remembered my father once saying, "Military ranks don't mean anything in the civilian world, Sarah. Out here, it's about what you can accomplish, not what title they give you." He would learn tomorrow that in my world, this rank represented exactly what I could accomplish, repeatedly, under pressure, and at the highest levels of responsibility. I woke before dawn and began my morning routine with military precision. Every detail of my uniform was inspected and perfected. Each ribbon properly aligned, every piece of brass polished to mirror brightness, my hair styled according to regulations. The woman in the mirror reflected confidence, authority, and purpose. No trace remained of the insecure girl who had once desperately sought her parents' approval. As I pinned the lieutenant colonel insignia to my collar, I reminded myself that this moment wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about finally allowing my family to see me as I truly was, for better or worse. Downstairs, I could hear my parents and David preparing for their day, discussing the importance of making good impressions during the CEO's visit. They had no idea I would be joining them, much less in what capacity. I waited until I heard their cars pull away before heading out to my own vehicle, a practical sedan that gave no hint of my military status. The drive to Sterling Defense Corporation took 20 minutes through suburban Colorado streets lined with strip malls and chain restaurants. I used the time to center myself, reviewing key points about the contract I would be discussing and reminding myself that this was about national security, not family dynamics. As I pulled into the visitor parking area, I straightened my uniform one final time. The weight of responsibility settled comfortably on my shoulders, far more natural than the weight of family expectations had ever been. Sterling Defense Corporation occupied a modern glass building that housed some of the most advanced cybersecurity development in the country. Security was appropriately tight for a facility handling classified military contracts. At the main entrance, 2 security guards straightened immediately upon seeing my uniform and rank. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel," the first guard said, recognizing the silver oak leaf on my shoulder. "May I see your identification, please?" I presented my military ID and project authorization. "Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Pentagon Liaison for Project Sentinel." The guard's eyes widened as he processed my clearance level. "Yes, ma'am. You're expected in Conference Room A. Would you like an escort?" "That won't be necessary. I have the building layout." As I walked through the lobby, I could feel the atmosphere shift around me. Military officers of my rank rarely visited corporate facilities, and certainly not ones as young as me. Employees stopped their conversations mid-sentence as I passed, some nodding respectfully, others clearly curious about my presence. The elevator carried me to the executive floor, where the day's meetings would take place. As the doors opened, I came face to face with my brother David, who was reviewing notes on his tablet. His eyes flicked up casually, then widened in shock as he registered both my presence and my uniform. "Sarah, what are you doing here? And why are you wearing?" He trailed off as he noticed the lieutenant colonel insignia, confusion, and the first traces of alarm crossing his face. "Good morning, David," I replied professionally. "I'm here for the project review." Before he could respond, my father appeared around the corner, deep in conversation with two other executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to growing concern. "Sarah, what's going on? Why are you in uniform?" He glanced around nervously, clearly worried about what his colleagues might think. "Dad," I acknowledged with a nod. "I'm just heading to the conference room to prepare. The meeting starts in 15 minutes. The executives with my father were staring at my rank insignia with growing recognition. One of them, Barbara Chen from Legal, according to her name badge, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Colonel, it's an honor to have you here. We weren't aware you would be attending in person today." My father's face went pale. "Lieutenant Colonel? Sarah, what is this about?" I maintained my professional demeanor, aware of the growing audience in the hallway. "I believe CEO Hawkins will explain everything during the meeting. If you'll excuse me." As I walked toward the conference room, I could hear whispered conversations erupting behind me. Years of military training had taught me to maintain composure under pressure, but I couldn't deny a small satisfaction at their shock. The conference room was already being prepared by staff, setting up presentation materials and arranging water and coffee for the high-level meeting. A young administrative assistant nearly dropped her stack of folders when she saw me enter. "Oh, Lieutenant Colonel, we weren't told you would be here in person. Do you need anything special set up?" "Everything looks fine, thank you," I replied, taking my seat at the position reserved for the military liaison. Over the next 10 minutes, various executives and project leaders filtered into the room. Many introduced themselves with a deference that contrasted sharply with how my family had treated me just hours earlier. Several mentioned being surprised to meet me in person, struck as they had been expecting a video conference. My father and brother entered together, both looking unsettled. They took seats across the room from me, occasionally shooting confused glances in my direction. I focused on reviewing my notes, not giving them the satisfaction of an explanation before the meeting officially began. At precisely 9 a.m., the door opened, and CEO Patricia Hawkins entered, flanked by her senior leadership team. Patricia was a formidable presence in the defense industry, known for her strategic brilliance and direct communication style. She had built Sterling Defense into one of the nation's top contractors through innovation and excellence. The room fell silent as she scanned the attendees, her gaze stopping when it reached me. A smile of recognition spread across her face as she changed direction, walking directly to my position. "Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell," she said warmly, extending her hand. "What an unexpected pleasure to have you here in person. I thought we were scheduled for a video conference." I stood and shook her hand firmly. I was visiting family in the area and thought this would be a good opportunity to review the project progress firsthand. Patricia nodded approvingly. "Excellent initiative. Your presence will certainly make today's discussions more productive." She turned to address the room, her voice carrying unmistakable authority. "For those who may not be aware, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell is our Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. She has oversight authority for all technical specifications and implementation strategies, with final approval on all major decisions." I watched my father's jaw literally drop across the room. David was staring at me as if seeing a stranger for the first time. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel," Patricia continued with a respectful nod. "I look forward to your insights today." The meeting began with comprehensive project updates from various team leaders. Each presenter addressed their comments to both Patricia and me, acknowledging my authority over the military aspects of the contract. When technical questions arose about integration with existing defense systems, all eyes turned to me for guidance. I provided detailed analysis and clear directives, drawing on my years of specialized experience in cybersecurity protocols. With each insightful comment I made, I could see my father and brother exchanging incredulous looks, their assumptions about my capabilities crumbling in real time. When it came time for David to present his portion of the project, his normally confident voice wavered noticeably. "As team lead for user interface integration, I've developed a streamlined approach to..." He faltered as he caught my eye, clearly thrown by my presence and position. "Please continue, Mr. Mitchell." I encouraged professionally, treating him like any other presenter rather than my brother who had dismissed my career just 12 hours earlier. David stumbled through his presentation, visibly shaken by the role reversal. When he finished, I asked several pointed technical questions that exposed significant gaps in his planning, not out of malice, but because the project demanded rigorous scrutiny. These are important considerations that need to be addressed before we can approve this phase, I concluded professionally. Please submit revised specifications by Friday. My father watched this exchange with a stunned expression, witnessing his son being held accountable by his daughter. The daughter he had dismissed for years as wasting her potential. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear to everyone in the room that I possessed expertise and authority that commanded genuine respect. My family was seeing for the first time what my colleagues and superiors had recognized years ago. When Patricia closed the meeting 2 hours later, she made an announcement that would change everything. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell will remain on site through Thursday to conduct security assessments and review our implementation protocols. I expect everyone to provide her with complete cooperation and access. This project is critical to national security and to Sterling's future success. As the room cleared, Patricia approached me again. Lieutenant Colonel, I must say your reputation is well deserved. General Rodriguez speaks very highly of you, but seeing you in action today confirms everything I've heard about your capabilities. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father hovering nearby, clearly struggling to approach me in this new context. Patricia gestured for me to join her small circle of senior executives, unaware of the family drama unfolding nearby. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, let me properly introduce you to our leadership team. Some you may know from project documentation, but personal connections are always valuable. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of collegial respect that would have been impossible between a CEO and a junior employee. Everyone, this is Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the Pentagon's primary liaison for Project Sentinel. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell has been instrumental in developing the security frameworks that form the backbone of our entire system. The Senior Vice President of Engineering, Thomas Park, extended his hand. Lieutenant Colonel, your work on adaptive threat assessment protocols has been groundbreaking. We've implemented several of your recommendations already, and the results have exceeded our projections. Thank you, Mr. Park. I appreciate seeing theoretical work applied effectively, I replied, acutely aware of my father and brother watching this exchange with disbelief. Patricia continued the introductions until she reached my father. And of course you must know Robert Mitchell, our senior project manager. Robert has been with Sterling for nearly 3 decades. An awkward silence fell as everyone registered our shared last name. Patricia looked between us, realization dawning on her face. Mitchell, are you related? Before I could answer diplomatically, my father stepped forward. She's my daughter, he said, his voice carrying a complex mixture of confusion and what sounded like dawning pride. Your daughter? Patricia looked genuinely surprised. Robert, you never mentioned your daughter, was Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell. The Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who's been overseeing our most important military contract. My father struggled to find words. I wasn't aware of Sarah's current position or responsibilities. Patricia turned to me with a questioning look. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the personal undercurrents. My family and I haven't had many opportunities to discuss my recent career progression, I explained simply. David, unable to contain himself any longer, stepped forward. You're serious? You're the lieutenant colonel everyone's been talking about? The one with final approval authority on the entire project? Yes, I confirmed. I've been overseeing Project Sentinel for the past 4 months since my promotion to lieutenant colonel. 4 months? My father repeated, his voice hollow. You've been a lieutenant colonel for 4 months and never told us? Patricia looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized she'd stumbled into family tension. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, perhaps we should continue our technical discussions? I nodded gratefully for the professional redirect. Of course. Project Sentinel represents an $800 million investment in next-generation cybersecurity infrastructure. As military liaison, my role is to ensure all developments meet Pentagon specifications and security requirements. I moved to the front of the room and activated the presentation screen, displaying the project overview. As I spoke, I could see the expressions on executives' faces shift to genuine respect and attention. My detailed knowledge of both technical aspects and strategic implications demonstrated exactly why I held my position. All major design decisions, budget allocations, and implementation timelines require my approval before proceeding. I continued, the words landing heavily in the room. This includes staffing decisions for key positions and performance evaluations. My brother went pale at this last point, undoubtedly remembering his boastful comments about his new leadership role. Patricia nodded approvingly as I finished my overview. As you can all see, we are fortunate to have Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell guiding this project. Her expertise is unmatched, and her authority in these matters is absolute. The executives nodded in agreement, several making notes. My father sat rigidly in his chair, his expression unreadable. In fact, Patricia continued, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell will be conducting performance evaluations of all team leads over the next 3 days to assess our progress and resource allocation. David's face went ashen. Just last night, he had laughed about my career amounting to nothing, and now I would be evaluating his professional performance. As the meeting concluded, Patricia pulled me aside. Lieutenant Colonel, I had no idea Robert was your father. This must be quite a proud moment for your family. I offered a diplomatic smile. It's certainly a significant moment. Well, they should be extremely proud. Your work has been exceptional. I've told Robert many times how fortunate we are to have such a strong military partnership on this project. My father overheard this exchange as he approached, his expression now a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be dawning regret. Sarah, he began, struggling with how to address me in this new context. We need to talk. Of course, I replied professionally. I have a brief meeting with the security team, then I'm available at 11 a.m. in conference room B. He nodded mutely, not used to taking scheduling directions from me. As the executives filed out, I could hear them discussing the unexpected revelation. Did you know Robert's daughter was Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell? No wonder she advanced so quickly. Actually, I heard she deliberately avoided any family connections, did it all on merit. The last comment carried clearly across the room, causing my father to stop in his tracks. The implication was clear. I had achieved my position not because of family connections, but despite their lack of support. At precisely 11 a.m., I knocked on the conference room door. Through the glass partition, I could see not just my father, but my mother and brother as well. Someone had called my mother to come to the office after the morning's revelations. Enter, my father called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I stepped inside, still in full uniform, and closed the door behind me. My mother sat perched on the edge of a chair, her expression fluctuating between confusion and something that looked almost like anxiety. David stood by the window, arms crossed defensively. Please, sit down, my father offered, gesturing to the chair across from his temporary workspace. Thank you, but I prefer to stand, I replied automatically, adopting the military at-ease position with my hands clasped behind my back. An uncomfortable silence filled the room until my father finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us? All this time, we thought... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. You thought what, Dad? I asked calmly. That I was wasting my potential? That I would never amount to anything in the military? That I was hiding from real competition? I quoted their various dismissals over the years without raising my voice or showing anger. We didn't know, my mother interjected weakly. How could we know if you never told us? I sent you invitations to every promotion ceremony, I replied factually. I called after each new assignment. I emailed you articles when my work was mentioned in defense publications. But a lieutenant colonel, my father said, still struggling with the concept. That's equivalent to a senior vice president in the corporate world. Approximately, yes, I confirmed, watching this comparison land exactly as expected. And you have authority over our contract? David asked, his tone more subdued now. Over my project? I have oversight responsibility for all aspects of Project Sentinel, I replied evenly. The timing of this visit was coincidental, though admittedly educational. Educational? My father repeated, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. You showed up at my workplace in uniform without any warning. Do you have any idea how this looks? People will think I used family connections to get my daughter assigned to our project. I had to suppress a laugh. Dad, I've spent my entire career avoiding any connection to Sterling Defense precisely to prevent that perception. General Rodriguez assigned me to this project because of my expertise in cybersecurity systems and my track record with similar implementations. General Rodriguez? My mother asked. My mentor and commanding officer, I explained. She's been what you could have been all these years, supportive, challenging when necessary, and proud of my accomplishments. The words hit home, and I saw my mother flinch at the comparison. So this was all about making us look foolish? David said, some of his defensiveness returning. Proving us wrong for not believing in your military career. No, I said firmly. This was about doing my job. The job I've trained for, sacrificed for, and excelled at for 7 years. The fact that you never took it seriously is not my responsibility. My father stood up, frustration finally breaking through his shock. You could have prepared us. You deliberately let us go on thinking you were still some junior officer somewhere. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever shown genuine interest in my career? Last night at dinner, not one of you asked a single meaningful question about my work or my life. It was all about David's promotion and Amanda's house. The truth of this statement hung in the air between us. We always wanted what was best for you, my mother said weakly. No, I corrected her gently. You wanted what you thought was best for me. You wanted me to follow a path you understood and valued. When I chose differently, you decided my choice was invalid, rather than considering that I might know what was right for my own life. My father sank back into his chair, the anger deflating. David followed our plan. He's doing well. I'm happy for David, I said sincerely. But that was never going to be my path. I needed something different, something that challenged me, something that made a difference. David uncrossed his arms, his defensive posture softening. All these years, we thought you were just stuck, going nowhere. I know what you thought, I replied. You made it very clear every time we spoke. He had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't know. None of us knew. You never asked, I pointed out. None of you did. My mother stood up suddenly, her expression shifting as she processed everything. Well, now we know. And of course, we're very proud indeed. I could see her already beginning to rewrite history, and I stopped her gently. Mom, please don't do that. Don't pretend you've been supportive all along. It diminishes any chance of genuine reconciliation. Her mouth opened and closed, unused to being directly contradicted. Sarah, my father said, using my name instead of my rank for the first time since the meeting. What do you want from us now? An apology? Public recognition? What I've always wanted, I replied simply. Respect for my choices. Acknowledgement that my path, while different from what you planned, has value and meaning. The room fell silent as they absorbed my words. Finally, my father stood and approached me. For a moment, I thought he might try to hug me, but he stopped and extended his hand formally instead. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I owe you an apology, a significant one. I failed to recognize your achievements and dismissed your career out of ignorance and prejudice. I was wrong. The formality of his approach was so characteristic, yet the admission was entirely new. I accepted his handshake. Thank you, Dad. I still don't understand everything about what you do, he continued. But I would like to learn, if you're willing to teach me. It was more than I had expected, and I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. I would like that. My mother approached next, less comfortable with direct apologies. We should have come to your ceremonies, she said instead. I would have liked to see you recognized. It was as close to an apology as she could manage, and I accepted it with a nod. David remained by the window, clearly struggling internally. Finally, he spoke. So you significantly outrank most people in this building. This isn't a competition, David, I said. It never was. It always felt like one, though, he replied with surprising insight. Mom and Dad set us up that way from the beginning. I just had the advantage of following the path they already understood and approved of. It was the most honest thing my brother had said to me in years. We chose different paths, and both have value, I acknowledged. Your work here at Sterling is important too. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, what I saw in that meeting today, I could never do what you do. The technical knowledge alone, not to mention the leadership presence and authority. It was impressive. Coming from David, this was equivalent to a full apology, and I felt the last of my defensive walls begin to lower. Thank you, I said simply. My father cleared his throat. Patricia wants to have lunch with all of us today, now that she knows we're family. She's quite impressed with your work, Sarah. I know, I said simply, allowing myself a small smile. Of course you know, my father replied, shaking his head with what looked like newfound respect. You probably know more about Sterling's operations than I do at this point. Only the classified parts, I said, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh from him, perhaps the first we'd shared in years. The tension in the room had transformed into something different, something tentative but hopeful. There was damage to repair, years of dismissal and hurt to work through, but for the first time I felt that my family was truly seeing me. I have another meeting to attend, I said, glancing at my watch, but I'd be happy to join you for lunch with Patricia. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, Sarah, we. She struggled to find the words. I know, Mom, I said gently, one step at a time. I closed the door behind me, leaving my family to process the new reality. Their daughter, their sister, was not the failure they had believed her to be. She was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, and she had earned every ounce of the respect she now commanded. I hosted my family for dinner at my apartment in Washington, D.C. The spacious 2-bedroom condo near the Pentagon was a far cry from my childhood home in Colorado, but it had become my sanctuary over the past few years. The changes in our family dynamic were still evolving, but the progress was undeniable. My father arrived first, carrying a framed photograph from a recent defense industry magazine that featured me alongside General Rodriguez and other military leaders at a cybersecurity conference. I thought you might want a copy for your wall, he said, somewhat shyly. I have one in my office now, too. Thank you, Dad. That's thoughtful, I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. 6 months ago, he would have considered such military recognition irrelevant. My mother arrived with homemade apple pie, my childhood favorite. Her attempts at connecting were still sometimes awkward, but they were sincere. She had stopped making comparisons between me and David or Amanda, instead asking genuine questions about my work and life. Your apartment is beautiful, Sarah, she commented, looking around at the clean, organized space, so professional and elegant. Military precision, I joked, and she actually laughed, instead of using it as an opportunity to criticize my lifestyle choices. David and Jessica arrived last, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and genuine smiles. The most surprising transformation had been in my brother. After the initial shock wore off, he had approached me with real curiosity about my career and experiences. So, he began as we sat in the living room before dinner. I implemented those security protocols you suggested last month. The team thinks I'm brilliant for coming up with them. I raised an eyebrow. Did you give credit where it was due? He grinned sheepishly. Eventually, after enjoying the praise for about 10 minutes, but seriously, the implementation has been flawless. Patricia is impressed with the results. Good work, I said sincerely. Your team executes well. This simple professional acknowledgement meant more to him now than any familial praise ever had. He had started seeing me as a colleague worthy of respect, not just his little sister. My father, who had been examining the military commendations displayed modestly on my bookshelf, turned to me. I read that article about the cyber attack your team prevented in Germany. I didn't understand all the technical details, but it sounded incredibly significant. It was, I confirmed. We caught it early, which was fortunate. Lives were at stake? He asked, beginning to grasp the real-world importance of my work. Potentially, yes. Infrastructure security affects everyone, military and civilian populations. He nodded thoughtfully. I always thought military service was primarily about physical combat. I never considered the cyber battlefield or the strategic thinking involved. Most people don't, I acknowledged. That's partly what makes our work effective. Adversaries don't always see us coming. The doorbell rang, and I excused myself to answer it. General Rodriguez stood in the hallway, her uniform as impeccable as always, despite being off duty. "Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell," she greeted me with a warm smile. "General," I returned the greeting. "Thank you for joining us tonight." I had invited General Rodriguez partly because she was in town for Pentagon meetings, but also because I wanted my family to meet the woman who had believed in me when they hadn't. "Everyone," I announced as we entered the living room. "This is Brigadier General Maria Rodriguez, my commanding officer and mentor. General, this is my family." My father stood immediately, extending his hand with the respect he would show any high-ranking executive. "General Rodriguez, it's an honor. I understand we have you to thank for recognizing Sarah's potential." General Rodriguez shook his hand firmly. "The potential was always there, Mr. Mitchell. I simply provided opportunities for it to flourish." As we moved to the dining table, the conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering I could remember. General Rodriguez shared stories about military life that helped my parents understand the world I inhabited, while carefully avoiding classified details. "Sarah designed a threat assessment algorithm that's now standard protocol for all cybersecurity units," she told them over the main course. Her approach reduced successful breach attempts in training scenarios by 74%. I watched my parents absorb this information, seeing them truly hear about my accomplishments perhaps for the first time. "We didn't know," my mother said quietly. "All these years, we didn't know what you were really accomplishing." "You never asked," I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored those words 6 months ago. "But now you know, and that's what matters." After dinner, David helped me clear the dishes while our parents continued talking with General Rodriguez. "You know," he said quietly, "I spent years thinking I was ahead of you in life, getting promotions, making connections, building a career. But you were playing an entirely different game at a much higher level." "It was never a competition, David," I reminded him. "I know that now," he acknowledged, "and I'm sorry for making it feel like one." These moments of genuine connection would have seemed impossible during that painful family dinner 6 months ago. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps never would be fully complete, but it was real and meaningful progress. Later, as we enjoyed coffee and my mother's apple pie, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride, "who proved that following your own path can lead to extraordinary places. We may have been slow to see it, but we couldn't be prouder now." I raised my glass along with the others, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced with my family in many years. The validation I had once desperately sought from them no longer defined my worth, but their recognition was still healing. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you know." General Rodriguez raised her glass as well. "To family, to service, and to the courage it takes to forge your own path." In the end, this journey was never really about proving my family wrong. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be, whether they approved or not. Their eventual recognition was not the victory. The victory had been in making my choices for myself all along. That night, as I said goodbye to my family and General Rodriguez, I realized that the girl who had sat at that dinner table 6 months ago, enduring their dismissal and condescension, had been just as worthy of respect as the lieutenant colonel they now celebrated. The difference was that now I knew my own worth, regardless of whether others could see it. My mother hugged me goodbye, something she hadn't done in years. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." "I know, Mom," I replied. "I love you too." My father's goodbye was characteristically formal, but warm. "Lieutenant Colonel," he said with a slight smile, "until next time." David surprised me with a genuine embrace. "Thanks for not giving up on us," he said, "even when we gave up on you." "Family doesn't give up," I replied, "even when it's complicated." As I watched them leave, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought us to this point. The years of dismissal had taught me to find validation within myself. The eventual recognition was sweet, but it wasn't necessary for my sense of worth. I had learned that sometimes the people closest to us are the slowest to see our growth because they're still seeing who we used to be, not who we've become. But with patience, grace, and unwavering commitment to our authentic path, even the most strained relationships can find healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Heard about today from Mom. So proud of you, and not surprised at all. You were always destined for something special. I smiled and put my phone away. Tomorrow, I would return to my work, continuing to serve my country and protect the systems that keep us safe. Tonight, I would simply enjoy the peace that comes from being fully known and accepted by the people who matter most. The best part wasn't proving them wrong. It was finally being seen for who I truly was, and having them realize that the daughter they had underestimated was actually more remarkable than they had ever imagined. But most importantly, I had learned that my worth didn't depend on their recognition. It never had. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Remember to share with anyone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the best validation comes from staying true to yourself, regardless of what others think. Thank you for listening, and remember, your path is valid even when others fail to see its value.